Over the years, the name Hua Mulan has become synonymous with the Walt Disney cartoon Mulan, but the story's roots go a lot deeper than that. Let's learn all about this icon of Chinese literature and worldwide phenomenon. Hua Mulan is a legendary character. She is a fictitious warrior who lived during the Southern and Northern dynasties period of ancient Chinese history. Mulan began her soon-to-be historical life in a ballad known as the Ballad of Mulan. In the tale, Hua Mulan disguises herself as a man as a means to take her elderly father's place in the Chinese army. As a part of the military, Mulan waged war for 12 years, and during that time, she became renowned. But Mulan was at odds with her fame. She was never one to seek reward for her service. When it came time for her to retire, she did so in her hometown. Hua Mulan's story served as the inspiration for several stage and screen adaptations. She's become so famous that there's even a crater named after her on the planet Venus. Before we get into all these cool things, let's first dive into the character's rich history. The first transcription of the Ballad of Mulan was for the musical records of Old and New during the 6th century. The earliest existing text of the poem comes from an 11th or possibly 12th century anthology collection called The Music Bureau Collection by Guo Maoxian. In the book, Maoxian is very clear that he used the musical records of Old and New as the source for the poem. In ballad form, the lines don't always have equal amounts of syllables. The poem is made up of 31 couplets, and it is mainly composed of 5-character phrases. However, several of the phrases extend to 7 or 9 characters. During the late Ming Dynasty, a playwright named Zhu Wei went on to dramatize the tale in 2 acts. He called it The Female Mulan for short, but it also has a far longer and more descriptive title. The heroine Mulan goes to war in her father's place. As the years passed, the character of Mulan became a part of a historical romance novel called the Sui Tang Romance, written by Chu Renhua. The novel was released early on in the Qing dynasty during the 17th century. With time, Hua Mulan's story became wildly popular as a Chinese folktale. It's widely considered to be as significant as one of China's most famous tales, The Butterfly Lovers. So where does the name Mulan come from? And more importantly, what is its significance? In the Chinese language, the word Mulan refers to the flower known as the magnolia. Our heroine's family name varies by which version of the poem or story you're reading. According to History of Ming, which is one of the official Chinese historical works known as the 24 Histories, Mulan's family name is Zhu. However, according to the History of Qing, Mulan's family name is Wei. The family name Hua, which translates to flower, was introduced by the playwright we told you about earlier, Zhu Wei. Since Wei's introduction, Hua has gone on to become the most popularly accepted family name, in part because of its more poetic meaning. Historically speaking, Mulan is far more of a legend than she is an actual person. This is made all the more clear by the fact that her name doesn't appear in a famed biographical compilation of exemplary women who lived during the Northern Wei dynasty. However, Mulan's legend is included in Yan Zhiyuan's compilation of various women in Chinese folklore, known as the 100 Beauties. let's take a closer look at Mulan's story. The setting of the Ballad of Hua Mulan is the Northern Wei era, which endured from the years 386 until 536. The poem begins with Mulan sitting at her loom, worrying. War is on the horizon, and one male from each family is being called upon to join the army. Their purpose will be to defend the realm of Tuoba from the invaders of Ruran. Other than her mother, there are two people in Mulan's family. Her younger brother is just a small child, so that means her elderly father would be the one chosen to fight. Mulan knows that her father is too weak to perform his duty, so she decides to take his place. She says goodbye to her family and heads into battle. Luckily, Mulan is already extremely skilled as a fighter. While growing up, she learned archery, sword fighting, and martial arts. The fierce battle against Ruran invaders lasts for 12 long years. After the war, the Tuoba army heads home, and its warriors are richly rewarded. Once back, Mulan is offered an official post in the military, but turns it down. Instead, she asks only for just one thing: a single camel to carry her home. Her family welcomes her back with open arms and joy in their hearts. After a while, Mulan puts back on her women's clothing and goes to greet her comrades, who are in a state of disbelief over the fact that no one had realized she was a woman. Now let's focus on another telling of Mulan's tale. Chu Renhuo's romance of the Sui and Tang, which was originally written in the year 1675. The first edition of the story was published many years later in 1695, and it offers its readers new plot twists and backdrops. In Chu's version of the story, Mulan is found living under the rule of Hishana Khan, which took place from the year 603 until 619 of the Western Turkic Khaganate. Khan decides to wage war with the Tang dynasty, who is on the verge of conquering all of China. Mulan's father, Hua Hu, is frightened that he will be enlisted into the Khan's army because he only has an infant son and 2 daughters. To protect her father and her people, Mulan disguises herself as a man and enlists in his place. Upon entering the battle, Mulan is stopped by the forces of the Jia king Du Jiande and is taken in for questioning. The king's warrior daughter, Jianying, tries to recruit Mulan as a man. After Jianying discovers that Mulan is a fellow female warrior, she is delighted to find out that they will become sworn sisters. The Sui Tang romance comes to a far different conclusion than the majority of Hua Mulan legends. In Chu's version, Mulan's story comes to a tragic end. Jianyang's father is to be put to death after he sides with the enemy of the Tang dynasty. From there, the 2 sworn sisters surrender themselves for execution in the condemned man's place. The act of familial devotion pays off, and a reprieve is given from Emperor Taizong of Tang. The imperial consort who was birth mother to the emperor gives Mulan money so that she can provide for her parents. Wedding funds are given to the princess, who confesses that she promised herself to a general named Luo Cheng. Mulan is then allowed to travel back to her homeland after arrangements are made for Mulan's parents to move. Mulan is under the impression that they'll all be living in the princess's old capital of Lishou. Upon her homecoming, Mulan discovers that her father died a long time ago, and her mother has remarried. According to the novel, Mulan's mother had the family name of Yuan and is remarried to a man named Wei. To make matters worse, the Khan has summoned Mulan to the palace to become his mistress. Mulan has no desire to be kept or used by anyone. With no other alternative, she commits suicide. Scholars believe Mulan's motive for suicide is simple. A Chinese woman would prefer death by her own hand to serving a foreign ruler. So much of each telling of Mulan is steeped in history. One of the more famous modern tellings of the story is Walt Disney Pictures' 1998 animated musical, Mulan. Disney's 36th animated feature, Mulan, is based on the Chinese legend of Hua Mulan. The film was directed by Barry Cook and Tony Bancroft, from a story by Robert D. Sansucci, and a screenplay by Philip Lazebnik, Rita Hsiao, Eugenia Bostwick-Singer, Raymond Singer, and Chris Sanders. Before we get into the history of this award-winning animated feature, let's take a look at the plot of the film. A cruel warrior by the name of Shan Yu is at the command of a ruthless army known as the Huns. This band of merciless warriors is on a mission to invade Han China by breaching the Great Wall. As a means of retaliation, the Chinese emperor orders an immediate mobilization of his people, which dictates that one man from each family is to join the Chinese army. The film's title character is named Hua Mulan. Upon learning that Fa Xiao, her elderly father, intended to once again go to war, Mulan immediately fears for his well-being. Even though Xiao is an army veteran, his weakening health weighs heavily on Mulan's mind. Mulan decides to cut her long hair and put on her father's old armor. Now disguised as a man, she enlists in the army in her father's place. Once Mulan's family learns what she has done, her grandmother prays to the family ancestors for her granddaughter's safety. Her family ancestors order their Great Stone Dragon to watch over Mulan. A tiny dragon named Mushu is sent to wake up the mighty stone dragon, but he ends up destroying it in the process. Mushu, a former disgraced guardian himself, hides his mistake from the ancestors and decides that he will be the one who will protect Mulan. Once Mulan gets to the training camp, she successfully passes for a man. The only problem is that she isn't such a great fighter. Mushu reveals himself to Mulan and clumsily teaches her how to act like a man. Mulan and her fellow recruits, Yao, Qianpo, and Ling, become trained warriors under the guidance of Captain Li Shang. Mushu wants to see Mulan become a great success, so he creates a fake command from Shang's father, General Li, that orders Shang to follow the main imperial army as they head into the mountains. Upon arriving at the camp, they discover that the Huns have brutally defeated General Li and his army. As Mulan and her fellow troops leave the mountains, they're ambushed by the Huns. She may not be the best fighter yet, but Mulan is super clever. She uses a cannon to cause an avalanche that buries most of the attacking invaders. During the battle, the Huns' leader, Shan Yu, slashes Mulan in the chest. Unfortunately, when the time comes for her wound to be bandaged, she can no longer hide that she's a woman. According to Chinese law, Mulan was supposed to be executed for her deception. However, Shang decides to spare her life, and as punishment, dismisses her from the army. She is to be left alone, but is allowed to follow the recruits as they leave for the imperial city to report what took place in the mountains. Later on, it is revealed that Shan Yu, alongside several Han warriors, survived the avalanche and are now following Mulan and the troops intending to capture the emperor. Upon their arrival at the imperial city, Mulan isn't able to convince Shang about Shan Yu's survival and plans. The Huns seize the palace and capture the emperor. Yao, Qianpo, and Ling disguise themselves as mistresses to sneak into the palace. Shang helps them beat Shan Yu's and his men. Shang stops Shan Yu from killing the emperor, and Mulan lures the Han leader onto the roof. The stage is set for what Shan Yu believes to be a one-on-one rooftop battle. However, acting on Mulan's signal and instructions, Mushu shoots a huge skyrocket at Han's leader. Shan Yu is hit and sent flying into a fireworks launching tower, where he dies in a massive explosion. At first, Mulan is reprimanded by the emperor because she shamed her family, the army, and wrecked the palace. However, to her surprise, the emperor and the people of the city praise her for saving them. Mulan is awarded the emperor's crest and the sword of Shan Yu as gifts. She's even offered the role of advisor to the emperor. She refuses the role and asks only to be allowed to return to her family. Once she gets back to her home, she gives all of the gifts to her father. Shang soon arrives at Mulan's place to return her helmet. However, he has fallen in love with the warrior. Mushu is reinstated as Fa family guardian by the ancestors during a joyous celebration. Despite centuries of popularity, the Disney version of Mulan is the one that has become ingrained in pop culture. So how did it come to be? Let's take a look at creating an ethnic hero to take her rightful place among the usually blonde and blue-eyed champions. In the year 1989, a new studio opened called Walt Disney Feature Animation Florida. It opened its doors somewhere between 40 to 50 employees, who were supposed to produce cartoon shorts and featurettes. By late in the year 1993, after working on several aspects of Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, and Aladdin, Disney executives were convinced to let the Feature Animation Florida studios create and produce their first independent film. During that same time, Disney Feature Animation started taking an interest in Asian-themed legends and folklore, starting with the optioning of several books by children's book author Robert D. Sansucci. Up until that point, Suchi served as a consultant to Disney executive Jay Dyer. It wasn't long before a straight-to-video short film based on one of Suchi's stories called China Doll began development in the West. China Doll told the tale of a sad Chinese girl who was swept off of her feet by a British Prince Charming. The current president of the Disney Theatrical Group, Thomas Schumacher, asked Suchi if he had any other stories he'd like to see told. And Suchi turned in a manuscript of a book based on the Chinese poem, The Song of Hua Mulan. Soon after that, Filmmakers Tony Bancroft and Barry Cook were attached as co-directors of the upcoming Mulan animated feature. Bancroft and Cook had already worked with Disney on such projects like Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin, so it was clear that Mulan was in capable hands. In the year 1994, Disney sent a group of artistic supervisors to China for 3 weeks so that they could take photos and to make drawings of local landmarks for inspiration, as well as up the local culture. Before the start of production, the team began looking for Japanese, Filipino, Korean, and of course Chinese voice actors. Tia Carrere was an early candidate to voice the title character. However, Lea Salonga, who had been the singing voice of Princess Jasmine in Aladdin, was initially cast to provide both Mulan's speaking and singing voices. Still, the directors did not find her attempt at a deeper speaking voice when Mulan impersonated Ping to be convincing. It was then that actor Ming-Na Wen was brought in to speak the role, and Salonga was given the gig to provide Mulan's singing voice. Wen landed the part after filmmakers heard her narration at the beginning of a film called The Joy Luck Club. For the role of Mushu, Disney was looking for top Hollywood talent in the vein of Robin Williams' performance as the genie in Aladdin. They approached legendary comedian Eddie Murphy for the role. At first, Murphy balked when asked to record at the Disney studios. He then asked to record the voice in his basement at his Bubble Hill mansion in Englewood, New Jersey. For the speaking voice of Captain Li Shang, B.D. Wong was hired, although his singing voice for the song I'll Make a Man Out of You was performed by Donny Osmond, who previously auditioned to be the speaking voice of the title character in Hercules. Osmond's casting originated from a suggestion from the casting director, and throughout the recording, Osmond studied Wong's dialogue tapes and aimed to match his inflections and personality. Osmond commented that his sons decided that he had finally made it in show business when he was in a Disney film. Likewise, for the role of Grandmother Fa, June Foray provided the speaking voice, and Marnie Nixon supplied the singing voice. To achieve a harmonious visual look, producer-designer Hans Bacher and art director Rick Sluter, along with Robert Walker and head of background Robert Stanton, collaborated to establish a proper chronological location for the film in Chinese history. Since there was no consensus on the time of Mulan's existence, they based on the visual design on the look and feel of the Ming and Qing dynasties. An important element of Bacher's plan was to turn the art style closer to Chinese painting, with watercolor and a more straightforward design, as opposed to the details of The Lion King and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Bacher further studied more than 35 film directors ranging from the silent era German Expressionism, British and American epics of the 50s and 60s, and the spaghetti westerns for inspiration for composition, lighting, and staging that would establish settings that enhanced the characters. Additional inspiration was found in earlier Disney animated films, such as Bambi, Pinocchio, and Dumbo to develop a sense of staging. In October 1997, the Walt Disney Company announced a major expansion of its Florida animation operations, constructing a 200,000 square foot, 4-story animation building and the addition of 400 animators to the workforce. To create 2,000 Hun soldiers during the Huns' attack sequence, the production team developed crowd simulation software called Attila, This software allows thousands of unique characters to move autonomously. A variant of the program called Dynasty was used in the final battle sequence to create a crowd of 3,000 in the Forbidden City. Pixar's photorealistic Open API RenderMan was used to render the crowd. Another software developed for this movie was Faux Plane, which was used to add depth to flat two-dimensional painting. Although developed late in production progress, Faux Plane was used in 5 shots, including the dramatic sequence which features the Great Wall of China and the final battle sequence when Mulan runs to the Forbidden City. During the scene in which the Chinese are bowing to Mulan, the crowd is a panoramic film of real people bowing. It was edited into the animated foreground of the scene. In March 1994, Stephen Schwartz was attached to compose the lyrics and music for the songs for the film. Following the research trip to China in June 1994, Schwartz was contacted by former Disney Studio chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg to compose songs for the Prince of Egypt, which he agreed. Pete Schneider, then president of Walt Disney Feature Animation, threatened to have Schwartz's name removed from any publicity materials for Pocahontas and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Michael Eisner phoned Schwartz and urged him to back out of his commitment to DreamWorks, but he refused and left the project. After Schwartz's departure, his 3 songs, Written in Stone, Destiny, and China Doll, were dropped amid story and character changes by the year 1995. Shortly after, Disney music executive Chris Monton heard Matthew Wilder's demo for a stage musical adaptation of Anne Rice's Cry to Heaven and selected Wilder to replace Schwartz. In July 1997, David Zappel joined to write the lyrics. The film featured 5 songs composed by Wilder and Zappel, with a 6th planned initially for Mushu, but dropped following Eddie Murphy's involvement with the character. Although Danny Elfman and Thomas Newman were considered for scoring the film, English composer Rachel Portman was selected as the film composer. However, Portman became pregnant during production and decided to back out. Following Portman's departure, Randy Edelman, whose Dragonheart theme was used in the trailer, and Kitaro were considered until Jerry Goldsmith became available and signed on after dropping out of a project. The film's soundtrack is credited for starting the career of pop singer Christina Aguilera, whose first song to be released in the US was her rendition of Reflection, the first single from the Mulan soundtrack. The song and Aguilera's vocals were so well received that it landed her a recording contract with RCA Records. In 1999, she would go on to release her self-titled debut album, on which Reflection was also included. The pop version of Reflection has a Polish version and 2 Spanish versions for Spain and Latin America. Other international versions include a Brazilian-Portuguese version by Sandy and Junior, a Korean version performed by Lena Park, and a Mandarin version by Coco Lee. The music featured during the haircut scene, titled Mulan's Decision, is different in the soundtrack album. The soundtrack album uses an orchestrated score, while the movie uses heavy synthesizer music. The synthesizer version is available on the limited edition CD. Salonga, who often sings movie music in her concerts, has done a Disney medley, which climaxes with an expanded version of Reflection. Salonga also provided the singing voice for Mulan in the film's sequel, Mulan 2. Because of the disappointing box office performances of The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Hercules, Disney restricted its marketing campaign for Mulan, spending $30 million on promotional advertisements compared to more than $60 million for Hercules the year before. Instead of the lavish media event premieres of Pocahontas in Central Park and the electric light parade on Fifth Avenue for Hercules, Disney opted to premiere the film at the Hollywood Bowl, complete with Chinese lanterns and fortune cookies. 2 days before the general release, McDonald's launched its promotional campaign by including one of 8 toys free with the purchase of a Happy Meal. The promotion also included Szechuan sauce for its Chicken McNuggets, which would be referenced in a 2017 episode of the Adult Swim series Rick and Morty, and subsequently brought back by McDonald's as a promotional item related to that show. Who knew that even the sauce associated with Mulan would become a surprise hit? The surprises kept right on coming too. Mulan grossed $22.8 million in its opening weekend, ranking second behind The X-Files. It went on to gross $120 million in Canada and the United States combined, and $304 million worldwide. This made Mulan the second highest grossing family film of the year, behind A Bug's Life and the 7th highest grossing film of the year overall. While Mulan domestically outgrossed the previous 2 Disney animated films which came before it, The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Hercules, its box office returns failed to match those of the Disney films of the early 1990s, such as Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. Internationally, its highest grossing releases included those in the United Kingdom, where it made $14.6 million, and France, where it raked in $10.2 million at the box office. Disney was keen to promote Mulan to the Chinese, hoping to replicate their success with their 1994 film, The Lion King, which was one of the country's highest-grossing Western films at that time. Disney also hoped it might smooth over relations with the Chinese government, which had soured after the release of Kundun, a Disney-funded biography of the Dalai Lama that the Chinese government considered politically provocative. China had threatened to curtail business negotiations with Disney over that film, and as the government only accepted 10 foreign films per year at that time to be shown in their country, Mulan's chances of being accepted were low. Finally, after a year's delay, the Chinese government did allow the film for a limited Chinese release, but only after the Chinese New Year, to ensure that local films dominated the more lucrative holiday market. Box office income was low due to both the unfavorable release date and rampant piracy. Chinese people also complained about Mulan's depiction as too foreign-looking and the story as too different from the myths. As of this documentary, the Walt Disney Company has a new live-action feature film waiting to be released based upon Mulan. The new film is being helmed by female New Zealand film director and screenwriter Nico Caro, and it stars Chinese singer and dancer Liu Yifei in the title role. Mulan was scheduled to be released in the year 2020, but an exact date for its box office premiere has yet to be determined because of the global pandemic known as the novel coronavirus. One thing is for certain, by the time that Mulan is released, the world will be ready for singing, dancing, and adventure. The story of Hua Mulan has endured for centuries, and it continues to evolve and inspire. We're likely to keep seeing different tellings and versions of it for years to come. That's what happens to classics, and Mulan is certainly that.